chosen ones. Stop for just a moment. This isn't just another video. You didn't land here by chance. There is a reason your heart tightened the second you heard those words. There is a reason your spirit leaned in before your mind could explain it. Because deep inside you already know. You have always known. Your life has never moved like everyone else's. Your path has never felt ordinary. And the pain that tried to bury you was never the end of your story. You were not built to blend in. You were built to blend patterns. You were built to carry something heavier than comfort, something heavier than applause, something heavier than approval. And while the world looked at your quiet seasons as failure, heaven was calling them formation. While people called it isolation, the unseen realm called it preparation. That is the truth most people never understand. The chosen one is not chosen for an easy life. The chosen one is chosen for a meaningful one, a life that shakes rooms without raising its voice, a life that awakens people without begging to be seen, a life that gets refined in silence before it ever gets revealed in public. And that silence you survived was not empty. It was training your spirit to hear what others cannot hear. You spent days wondering why you felt so separate, why conversations felt shallow, why crowds drained you, why the things that satisfied others left you restless, why your soul kept pulling away from what was familiar. And every time you tried to settle into the life they expected, something inside you refused. That resistance was not confusion. That resistance was destiny remembering itself. Chosen ones often grow up feeling too sensitive, too deep, too intense, too quiet, too observant, too different. They are the ones who notice what everyone else misses. They hear the pain behind smiles. They sense the lie behind polished words. They walk into a room and feel energy before anyone speaks. They do not just live in the world, they feel the world. And because of that, they are often misunderstood. They are mislabeled as difficult, misread as distant, called strange, called broken, called emotional, called hard to love. But what people call broken is often just unhealed power. What they call distance is often divine protection. What they call silence is often a soul-gathering strength. There comes a season when the chosen one is pulled into loneliness so deep it feels like exile. Friends drift, connections fade, plans collapse. The noise gets stripped away one layer at a time, and at first it feels cruel. It feels like life is taking everything. But later you realize something sacred was happening. The world was being removed so the truth could remain. Because sometimes the loudest form of preparation is isolation. Not punishment, preparation. Not abandonment, preparation. Not abandonment, preparation. Not rejection, preparation. You were not left behind. You were being separated. You were being interrupted before the wrong life could finish forming around you. The chosen one has to be broken open before they can be built right. Not because they are weak, because they contain too much light to stay hidden forever. And light does something strange when it begins to rise. It exposes every mask. It exposes every fake bond. It exposes every false version of you that was created to survive, but not to live. That exposure can be painful, but it is holy. This is why your awakening felt like both a blessing and a wound. One day you could no longer ignore the inner voice. One day the old distractions stopped working. One day the music, the scrolling, the noise, the routine, the pretending, all of it lost its power over you. Your spirit began asking deeper questions. Who am I when nobody is watching? Why am I here? Why does my soul ache for something I cannot name? That ache was not madness. That ache was memory. Because the soul of the chosen one remembers before the mind understands, it remembers purpose, it remembers assignment. It remembers the weight of a calling that was placed on you long before the world gave you a name. And that is why your awakening often began with loss. Loss of comfort, loss of certainty, loss of people who could no longer follow where your spirit was going. You were shedding layers that were too small for who you are becoming. You do not awaken by accident. You awaken when your old life can no longer contain your truth. You awaken when the pain becomes louder than the performance. You awaken when your heart refuses to keep pretending. And once that door opens, there is no real going back. You start seeing everything differently. You start seeing motives. You start seeing patterns. You start seeing the difference between what is loud and what is real. That is when society begins to push back, because awakened people are inconvenient. They do not move like the crowd. They ask uncomfortable questions. They do not worship appearances. They do not bow to empty status. They do not stay asleep just because sleep is popular. And a world built on distraction always feels threatened by a soul built on discernment. So they try to silence you, first by ignoring you, then by mocking you, then by mocking you, then by making you doubt what you know in your bones. They tell you to be realistic. They tell you to stop overthinking. They tell you to relax. They tell you to fit in. But the chosen one was never sent here to fit inside a broken system. You were sent to expose what was broken. There is a reason your boundaries became stronger. There is a reason your tolerance for nonsense disappeared. There is a reason you can no longer sit in places that once felt normal. Your spirit is developing standards. Your energy is learning what it will no longer carry. Your mind is rejecting noise that used to numb you. And every time you choose peace over chaos, you are proving that the isolation was not empty. It was purifying. A chosen one does not just suffer. A chosen one transforms through suffering. That is the difference. The wound does not end them. It awakens them. The betrayal does not destroy them. It reveals them. The silence does not erase them. It teaches them how to hear the divine in the dark. There were moments when you thought the heaviness would swallow you, moments when you felt unseen, moments when you felt like you were walking through life with no witness but your own soul, moments when the loneliness got so loud you wondered if you were the problem. But you were not the problem. You were the one who could feel what others refused to face. You were the one who could not pretend the world was fine when it was fractured. That burden is heavy, yes, but it is also a sign. Because the chosen one is often the family cycle breaker, the pattern interrupter, the one who says, not again, not in this bloodline, not in this generation, not in this mind, not in this home, not in this whole. And that decision alone can make you feel like an outsider in your own life. But outsiders are often the first to see the exit from a prison everyone else thinks is home. You may have noticed that your presence affects people. Some are drawn to you without understanding why. Others become uncomfortable around you for no clear reason. That is because light does that. It comforts the honest. It unsettles the hidden. It reveals what is alive and what is only pretending to breathe. And when your inner light begins to grow, people who are committed to their own darkness often react before you ever speak. Your sensitivity is not a flaw. It is a signal system. Your intuition is not imagination. It is spiritual intelligence. Your discomfort in certain places is not weakness. It is discernment. Your urge to be alone is not social failure. It is a sacred clearing. The more you honor those signals, the more aligned your path becomes. And here is what makes the journey even more powerful. The very things that made you feel behind are often the things that prepare you to lead. The nights you cried alone become the nights you can hold space for others. The rejection you survived becomes the compassion you offer. The confusion you endured becomes the wisdom you speak. The loneliness you feared becomes the stillness where revelation lives. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was random. Nothing was sent to you without purpose. Now listen carefully, because this part matters. The chosen one is not chosen because they are better than others. They are chosen because they are willing to be shaped by what others avoid. They are willing to be stripped, willing to be humbled, willing to be emptied so they can be filled with something real. The calling does not make life easier. It makes life truer, and truth is often heavier before it becomes liberating. So many people want the crown. They do not want the crushing that builds the character to carry it. They want the spotlight. They do not want the shadow seasons that teach them humility. They want the gift. They do not want the discipline. They want the victory. They do not want the wilderness that teaches them how to survive it. But you, chosen one, were not built from shortcuts. You were built from fire, stillness, and invisible wars. And if you have ever wondered why your life felt like one long becoming, this is why. Because the soul does not arrive fully formed. It expands through experience. It learns through pressure. It matures through what it survives. And every time you thought you were losing yourself, you were actually meeting a deeper version of yourself, a version with less fear, a version with more truth, a version that no longer asks permission to exist. Drop one word in the comments right now, chosen. If this message is reaching you, like the video, subscribe, and stay with this journey, because there is still more to understand. There is still more beneath the surface. There is a reason the chosen path often feels like walking through shadow while carrying a flame. A reason people cannot always explain the pull they feel toward you. A reason your solitude has been teaching you things no classroom ever could, and a reason the deepest part of your story has not yet been fully revealed. You may have thought the test was whether you could survive being alone, but the real test was whether you could stay faithful to your essence when no one was clapping, whether you could keep your heart open after disappointment, whether you could keep your spirit clean after being misunderstood, whether you could remain soft without becoming weak, whether you could remain powerful without becoming cruel. That is the true initiation. The chosen one learns early that being seen is not the same as being known. Many people may notice you. Few will understand you, and even fewer will be able to hold the depth you carry. That is why your journey has required discernment. That is why not every door was meant for you. That is why some connections had to end before they could define you. Not everyone who enters your life is meant to travel with your soul. When the world cannot categorize you, it often tries to contain you. It tries to make your depth look like drama, your intuition look like paranoia, your boundaries look like arrogance, your healing look like rebellion. But the chosen one is not here to make others comfortable with truth. The chosen one is here to embody truth until it becomes undeniable. And truth has a way of rearranging everything. It changes how you speak. It changes what you accept. It changes what you tolerate. It changes the rooms you enter and the rooms you leave. It changes the energy you carry into a conversation. It changes the way you pray. It changes the way you love. It changes the way you love. It changes the way you stand when life tries to shake you. The deeper you awaken, the less you can fake, the less you can pretend, the less you can trade your peace for belonging. That is not because you have become cold. It is because your spirit has become clear. Clarity removes confusion. Clarity removes performance. Clarity removes the need to be everyone's favorite version of yourself. And clarity is one of the first signs that the preparation is working. You begin to notice the pattern. Every time life pushed you into a corner, you found strength you did not know you had. Every time someone walked away, you learned how to stand without leaning on broken support. Every time you were misunderstood, your inner world grew more stable. Every time you were isolated, your voice became more authentic. It was never waste. It was never random. It was construction in disguise. The world teaches people to chase validation. The path of the chosen one teaches surrender. The world teaches image. The chosen one learns essence. The world teaches noise. The chosen one learns resonance. The world teaches speed. The chosen one learns timing, and timing is everything when a soul is being prepared for impact. Because when your moment comes, it will not look like luck. It will look like alignment. It will look like years of hidden work suddenly becoming visible. It will look like calm after chaos. It will look like someone who was once overlooked, now carrying authority that cannot be faked. It will look like peace with roots. It will look like a voice that no longer trembles when it tells the truth. It will look like someone who has been through the fire without becoming it. And that is why your hidden seasons matter so much. They are where your authority was born. They are where your discernment was sharpened. They are where your identity stopped depending on the approval of others. They are where you learned that being alone does not mean being abandoned. Sometimes it means being hand-picked for a deeper assignment. Sometimes it means being protected from the noise long enough to hear your own soul clearly. There is a sacredness in being unable to fit into what was never meant for you. There is a grace in outgrowing environments that once held you. There is a wisdom in no longer forcing yourself into spaces that shrink your spirit. The chosen one does not just survive transition. They are forged by it. They learn that change is not always loss. Sometimes change is liberation. Sometimes removal is mercy. Sometimes distance is divine redirection. And if your heart has been heavy lately, hear this deeply. Heavy does not mean hopeless. Quiet does not mean empty. Delayed does not mean denied. Hidden does not mean forgotten. You are not losing your way. You are being refined into a vessel that can carry more than you thought possible. Even now, in this silence, something is strengthening beneath the surface. The most powerful souls are often the ones who spent the longest time being overlooked. Because when you are overlooked, you learn to see. When you are misunderstood, you learn to listen inward. When you are left out, you learn how to build from within. And when you build from within, no external storm can erase what has been established in your spirit. That is why the chosen one becomes unshakable, not because life was gentle, because life was honest. And the honesty of this path is fierce. It tells you that not everyone will celebrate your awakening. It tells you that some will resist your growth because your growth threatens the roles they assigned you. It tells you that peace will cost you certain attachments. It tells you that truth will cost you certain comforts. It tells you that standing in your calling will require you to disappoint people who preferred your silence. But those costs are never greater than the life you gain. You were never meant to remain the version of yourself that only survived. You were meant to become the version that leads. The version that heals. The version that speaks with fire and tenderness at the same time. The version that can enter darkness without becoming lost in it. The version that knows the difference between being alone and being aligned. And that version is rising now, whether the world is ready or not. So when the old loneliness returns, do not panic. When the old questions come back, do not shrink. When the old voices try to tell you that you are too much, remember that too much is often another word for too alive, too deep, too awake, too rare, too real. And reality is exactly what this age tries hardest to dilute. You are not here to be diluted. You are here to be distilled, to become clearer, stronger, cleaner, more precise in spirit, more fearless in truth, more rooted in the invisible foundation that was laid in your darkest hours. Because the isolation was never trying to erase you. It was stripping away everything that could not travel with your purpose. And somewhere beyond the silence, beyond the ache, beyond the long nights of becoming, the next stage has already begun to move toward you, not as a reward, as a revelation, not as a rescue, as an unveiling, not as an ending. As the moment your light starts answering to its own name, there are moments in the journey of the chosen one where everything becomes unbearably still. No signs, no reassurance, no sudden miracle breaking through the clouds, just silence stretching across your life like an endless night. And in those moments, most people assume nothing is happening. But silence is never empty for the awakened soul. Silence is where transformation hides. Because what the world calls inactivity, the spiritual realm often calls incubation. The seed beneath the soil looks forgotten too. No applause reaches it. No sunlight touches it yet. Still, beneath the darkness, life is forming. Roots are spreading. Strength is developing in secret, and if the seed could speak too early, it might mistake the pressure for destruction instead of preparation. That is exactly what happened to you. You mistook the pressure for punishment. You mistook the waiting for abandonment. You mistook the isolation for failure. But every season that forced you inward was teaching you how to survive without external validation, teaching you how to stand when nothing around you confirmed your worth, teaching you how to trust the unseen before the visible arrived. And that lesson changes a soul forever. Most people collapse when applause disappears, but the chosen one learns how to breathe in hidden places, learns how to keep moving without recognition, learns how to continue even when nobody understands the vision burning inside them. That is spiritual endurance. That is sacred resilience. And once you develop it, you stop depending on the world to tell you who you are. You become rooted in something deeper. There is a reason you could never fully attach yourself to temporary things. A reason material success alone never satisfied your spirit. A reason shallow attention always felt hollow after a while. Your soul was built for substance, built for alignment, built for purpose that survives beyond appearances. And because of that, life had to remove certain illusions from your path. Not to hurt you, but to wake you up. The awakening of a chosen one rarely looks glamorous. It looks like confusion before clarity, like endings before beginnings, like grief before peace, like being stripped of identities you once depended on. At first it feels terrifying, because the old self fights to survive, the mask fights to remain, the familiar fights to keep control. But eventually something deeper rises, a voice. Quiet at first, almost impossible to explain, a knowing, a pull, a strange certainty that your life cannot remain the same. And once that voice begins to grow louder, your entire reality starts shifting around it. You begin walking away from things you once chased. You begin protecting your energy more carefully. You begin craving truth more than comfort. That shift confuses people, especially those who benefited from your unawakened self. They notice your distance, your silence, your boundaries, your refusal to entertain what drains your spirit. And because they cannot understand the transformation, they often take it personally. But your awakening was never an attack on them. It was a rescue mission for yourself. The chosen one eventually realizes that not every battle requires confrontation. Some battles are won through withdrawal, through silence, through refusing to participate in cycles designed to exhaust the soul. You do not always need to prove yourself. You do not always need to explain your spirit to people committed to misunderstanding you. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away without hatred. That is mastery. That is growth. And perhaps that has been one of your hardest lessons. Learning that peace is more valuable than being understood by everyone. Learning that protecting your spirit is not selfish. Learning that your energy is sacred. Because the deeper your awakening becomes, the more aware you become of spiritual exhaustion. You start noticing how certain conversations drain you, how certain environments darken your mind, how certain people leave your spirit heavy after they leave the room. That awareness is not weakness, it is evolution. There was a time when you ignored those signs, you stayed too long, explained yourself too much, carried burdens that were never yours. You tried to save people while abandoning yourself. But isolation changed that. The solitude forced you to sit with your own soul until you could no longer betray it. And once you truly hear your inner truth, betraying yourself becomes unbearable. That is why the chosen one eventually becomes selective. Selective with energy. Selective with access. Selective with access. Selective with words. Not because they hate people, because they finally understand the cost of misalignment. Every false environment steals something from the spirit. Every dishonest connection weakens clarity, and every compromise against your soul creates inner chaos that no external success can fix. The world teaches people to ignore themselves, to suppress intuition, to silence inner knowing, to normalize exhaustion, to chase approval until they no longer recognize their own reflection. But the chosen one cannot survive that way forever. Their soul eventually rebels. Their spirit eventually demands truth, and that demand changes everything. You may have noticed how your life started collapsing the moment you ignored your intuition too long. The discomfort became impossible to hide from. The anxiety became louder. The emotional exhaustion became heavier, because your spirit was signaling misalignment. And the longer a chosen one ignores misalignment, the stronger the inner storm becomes, not to destroy them, to redirect them. Redirection often feels painful in the beginning. Doors close unexpectedly, people disappear, plans unravel. You lose versions of yourself you thought would last forever, but looking back you realize something chilling. Most of what left your life was already draining your spirit long before it disappeared. The ending simply revealed what your soul already knew, and truth always arrives eventually. That is why awakened souls stop fearing endings the way they used to, because they understand endings differently now. They know that some endings are sacred, some endings are rescue, some endings are protection disguised as heartbreak, and some endings happen because your next level cannot coexist with your previous attachments. Growth requires space, transformation requires release, and release often feels lonely before it feels freeing. There is also something else the chosen one must confront: the fear of their own power, not power in the worldly sense, something deeper, the power of influence, the power of truth, the power of truth, the power of presence, the power to awaken others simply by existing authentically. That kind of power terrifies people who spent their whole lives shrinking themselves to survive. You may have spent years making yourself smaller, softer, quieter, less intense, less honest, less visible, just to avoid rejection, just to avoid conflict, just to avoid being labeled difficult or strange. But no matter how much you shrank, your soul never felt at peace pretending to be less than it truly was, because destiny cannot fully bloom inside self-betrayal. At some point, the chosen one must reclaim themselves completely, not the edited version, not the socially acceptable version, the real version, the deep-feeling version, the spiritually aware version, the truth-speaking version, the version that no longer apologizes for existing differently. That reclaiming process is not loud at first. It begins quietly, a boundary here, a truth there, a moment of choosing yourself instead of abandoning yourself, a moment of silence instead of forced explanation, a moment of walking away instead of begging to stay. And with every small act of alignment, your spirit grows stronger, your light grows steadier. Then one day you realize something profound. The isolation that once hurt you has now sharpened you. You think differently now, see differently now, discern differently now, discern differently now. The same silence that once felt unbearable now feels sacred, because in that silence you met yourself, not the role, not the performance, the soul beneath it all. And that meeting changes everything. Because once a person truly meets their soul, they can never fully return to superficial living. They can participate in the world, yes, but they no longer worship it. They no longer lose themselves chasing temporary approval. They no longer trade authenticity for acceptance. They understand that inner peace is more valuable than external image, and that understanding creates a different kind of strength, a quiet strength, an untouchable strength. The chosen one eventually stops asking, "Why am I alone?" and starts asking, "What is this solitude teaching me?" That question changes the entire journey, because now the pain becomes purpose. Now the silence becomes instruction. Now the waiting becomes refinement. Now the loneliness becomes revelation. And once suffering gains meaning, it loses the power to break you the same way. There are truths you can only hear when the world becomes quiet. Truths about who you are. Truths about what you deserve. Truths about what your spirit can no longer tolerate. And perhaps the deepest truth of all is this: you were never forgotten. You were hidden, protected while becoming, prepared while unseen, strengthened while separated from distraction. A sword is forged away from crowds, a diamond forms under pressure, and the chosen one awakens in hidden places most people would never survive emotionally. That hidden process is not glamorous, but it creates depth, creates wisdom, creates spiritual authority that cannot be purchased or imitated. And when that authority finally emerges, people call it power without realizing how much pain built it. The world only sees the glow. It does not see the darkness you survived to protect that light. It does not see the nights you questioned your worth, the battles you fought silently, the prayers whispered through tears, the moments you almost gave up, but somehow kept moving anyway. That invisible endurance became part of your spirit. And now your presence carries lessons your mouth does not even need to speak. People can feel when someone has survived themselves. They can feel when someone has walked through darkness and returned with wisdom instead of bitterness. That is why your energy affects rooms before your words do, because energy shaped through suffering carries depth that performance can never imitate. And the deeper your authenticity becomes, the stronger that presence grows. Not because you are trying to impress people, because truth naturally radiates. The chosen one eventually realizes they were never meant to chase everyone. They were meant to attract alignment naturally. The right people recognize depth. The right souls recognize resonance. The right connections do not require you to abandon yourself to keep them. And once you understand that, desperation leaves your spirit. You stop forcing, stop chasing, stop begging to be valued by people who cannot even value themselves properly. That freedom is sacred, because desperation clouds discernment, but peace sharpens it. The more at peace you become with yourself, the more clearly you can see what truly belongs in your life. You stop confusing attention for connection. You stop confusing chemistry for alignment. You stop confusing attachment for love. And suddenly your entire life begins operating from a deeper frequency. You were never meant to stay asleep. That is why comfort kept collapsing around you. That is why the universe kept interrupting the lives that would have numbed your spirit permanently. You were called toward awakening even when awakening hurt, because your soul knew that temporary pain was worth permanent truth. And now, even after everything, you are still here, still searching, still rising, still becoming. And maybe that is the greatest proof of all. Not that your journey was easy, not that you never broke, but that every time life tried to bury your spirit, something inside you kept choosing to rise, again and again, even in silence, even in exhaustion, even when nobody saw the battle except you and the divine. The isolation was never there to destroy your light. It was there to reveal it, to remove the noise, to strip away illusions, to teach you who you are without the opinions of the world shaping your identity. And now you stand different, wiser, more aware, more connected to your spirit than ever before. One day you will look back at the lonely nights, the closed doors, the confusion, the waiting, and realize something that changes everything. None of it was against you. Every painful season was shaping the strength you carry now. Every separation was guiding you closer to alignment. Every delay was protecting a version of you that had not fully awakened yet. You were never abandoned. You were being prepared for the moment you finally remembered your power. So if your path still feels lonely sometimes, do not fear it anymore. A different soul was never meant for an ordinary journey. You were called to awaken, called to transform, called to carry light in places where others lost themselves in darkness. And the fact that you survived everything that tried to break you means your purpose is stronger than the forces that came against you. The world may not fully understand you, but your spirit understands now. And that changes everything. Because once a chosen one fully awakens to who they are, they stop searching for permission to exist. They stop shrinking. They stop doubting the voice within, and they begin walking like someone who finally remembers. The isolation was never punishment. It was preparation.